The main thing that has plagued pirate radio stations since their migration from sea to land in the late 1960s has been getting caught. Most early land-based pirate radio stations operated in one of two ways. Either they'd sit with their equipment, transmitter and aerial system and do a live show, or because this often wasn't viable, they'd pre-record the shows onto tape, haul the equipment to a suitable location and leave it all there while the tape played the show. When the tape ran out, they'd return and gather everything before leaving, and this often meant that any station that was raided was unmanned. As time went by, the safest approach for live transmission was to use a studio-to-transmitter link to separate the two sites. There were two main kinds of links, band 1 and microwave. Nowadays, many stations use 4G, which is virtually impossible to detect, and I should point out there were also UHF links which used the same principle as the band 1 links, but these were less common. The band 1 links could be traced easily, but the microwave links were extremely difficult to trace. Band 1 links were wideband transmitters within 48 to 70 MHz. They output only a few watts, with some going beyond 20 watts, although this really was overkill. Not much power was needed because they transmitted at lower frequencies, and of course, lower frequency signals tend to achieve better ranges. The signal was sent from the studio to the main transmitter site using a dipole with elements cut for the link frequency. Now, because there wasn't a lot of spectrum between the link frequency and the main transmitter frequency, it was possible that the main transmitter could overload the link receiver due to the close proximity of the aerials. It was better to horizontally polarize the band 1 receiving dipole, and of course the main transmitter aerial was vertically polarized. The band 1 link signal was picked up by a dedicated receiver built into the transmitter. These links were problematic as the band was still relatively busy decades ago, and it was very easy for both saboteurs and the DTI to trace these links with very little skill and minimal equipment. These types of links often left studios at risk of raids, so another type of link was utilised in the form of microwaves. Microwave links are completely different to band 1, although the end result is the same. They work on the basis of a modulated power supply connected to a microwave horn, a type of antenna. The link signal travels in a thin beam, making tracking much more difficult but not impossible. The microwaves are on frequencies between 9.5 and 11 GHz and can cover quite long distances in good areas. The problem is at these frequencies, atmospheric conditions tend to attenuate the signal. Even certain weather conditions such as snow can completely wipe out a studio-to-transmitter link. Microwave links are line of sight and things like buildings and trees can block the signal. At the main transmitter side of the link is what is known as an LNB. These are commonly seen on satellite dishes, LNB standing for low noise block. If a pirate can't link to the place they need directly, they use what is known as a midpoint. This is where they link from the studio to a halfway point if something's blocking a direct path. From here, they'll then link to the main site, and this was also done with band 1 links. To track the studio, the DTI, the Radio Investigation Service and later Ofcom would go to the block and look where the LNB was pointing. Obviously the LNB wouldn't be 100% accurately aligned, but they'd know which direction it was pointing towards. Interestingly, for short distance links, they'd point the LNB slightly offset, and this was done by seeing how far they could offset it before losing signal by trial and error. This would sometimes throw them off slightly, but they'd eventually track the studio. Microwaves made it harder, and what the DTI would often do is monitor blocks and certain pirate hotspots, looking for activity that pointed towards the existence of a studio. Studios were moved regularly and were kept secret. Often, neighbours would report noise or suspicious activity, which would lead to detection. DJs would park cars a few streets away and walk to the studio to avoid being spotted. They'd often bring their records in carrier bags or sacks instead of record bags, which would make them stand out. They'd also keep mobile phone ringers at lower volumes and use dimmed lights where possible, as well as putting up sheets or curtains instead of nets to avoid being spotted.